Good Monday morning, afternoon, evening, and good night, whatever time you're watching this on Monday. It's October the 10th. Ohio State is 6-0, bowl eligible, 3-0 in the Big Ten, one Big Ten road game under their belt. And it was a 49-20 W in East Lansing, where upon rewatch, Bill, it looked pretty much the same as it did in first watch, but that doesn't mean it was any less impressive to see what Ohio State is able to do offensively when they are being that sort of efficient, defensively when they're getting the pressure that they were getting from their front four. And so we'll start there. This is the Rewatch Show. It's Mondays. It's what we do. What is your first thought? However you want to go about it, let's go about it. And I can tell you, folks, America, I did rewatch the game, and so did Bill.
We certainly did. Let's start on the defensive side, because I feel like we've written a lot about the offense at OhioState.Rivals.com and maybe talked more about that after the game than we did about the defensive effort. Obviously, it was very good to see them finally get some sacks. We had been talking about that as our pregame keys, really, for the last 4 weeks, wanting to see them actually hit the quarterback. And while I agree that much of that was because of how well the front played, I did think that we finally saw Jim Knowles do what he's talked about for the last couple of weeks, which is change some things up on the back end that make the quarterback hold the ball longer so that pass rush can finally get home. And a couple of plays stuck out to me. I have them written down on my notes here because I wanted to make sure I had them right. Like on Jerron Cage's sack, I believe in the third quarter, they had their three safeties lined up at the same depth, and Peyton Thorne, the Michigan State quarterback, I don't think is a quarterback who sees things very well. So I think whenever they did that and didn't sort of tip their hand pre-snap on what they were going to do coverage-wise, it led to either a sack or disruption in the backfield. And on that play in particular, they line up with three safeties at the same depth. They dropped the two outside guys, which were Tanner McAllister and Lathan Ransom, and the middle guy, Ronnie Hickman, kind of plays like a more shallower zone. It's Tampa 2 coverage, just like a cover 2 look, but I don't think Peyton Thorne expected that, and he holds on the ball for a really long time, and nothing like super special happened up front, but it gave a guy like Jerron Cage time to get home, and I thought that happened on a couple of the Mike Hall sacks too. Like, Mike Hall's a great player, and I'm sure we'll talk about him as an individual, but Jim Knowles has talked several times about the marriage of coverage and rush and how that is what ultimately leads to sacks, and I thought this week was the best example we've seen so far from Ohio State of that.
I also thought it was the best example of what I think truly makes a good pass rush, which is not a pass rush from your edge rushers, which is a pass rush up the middle. And Ohio State had 4 sacks in this game, and 3 of them, I guess 2.5, were from Michael Hall, and 1 was from Jerron Cage. So all of them were up the middle. Part of that, I think, is because JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, and other players were held like it was their birthday on Saturday, which was a little awkward to watch, but they certainly do get held a lot, and I think that's changing some things. But again, just by getting that push up the middle, you're seeing Ohio State create havoc. And Michael Hall, again, Pro Football Focus had him playing 7 snaps in the game, which is ludicrous for a number of reasons. But whatever, the fact that he essentially had 4 sacks on those 7 snaps, because one of them that he had got called back because of Zach Harrison's hand to the face penalty in the second quarter. They were certainly making it difficult for Peyton Thorne and the Michigan State passing game to see anything other than those little shots to the sideline that they kept taking.
Yeah, if Peyton Thorne did not see that immediately, it was trouble for Michigan State's offense, and he only saw that a couple of times. Maybe we'll talk about that later. A little lemon perf there for Burnwell, the product placement.
Delicious.
So on Mike Hall's last sack, I'm sure you maybe noticed this. JT Tuimoloau won with a spin move and got tackled, and then Zach Harrison kind of won around the edge and got a palm to the face mask. Neither one of them were covered, neither one of them were called. And Mike Hall and Peyton Thorne kind of ran into Mike Hall for the sack. So those guys, I think there's a lot of consternation about the defensive ends and why they're not the ones getting the sacks. My response to that is I don't care who gets them as long as they happen. But I think it's hard maybe to realize or appreciate that those guys are doing what they're supposed to do on plays like that. And for whatever reason, the officials decided to keep the flag in their pocket, and maybe you don't notice the impact of those guys. But I thought Zach and JT in particular played very well on Saturday.
They have for the last few weeks. I mean, it's not an accident. It's not a one-time thing. Those guys have been playing very well. I'm waiting for Jack Sawyer to elevate his game a little bit, but at the same time, maybe he doesn't have to right now because you have these other guys that are playing at a fairly high level. Javonte Jean-Baptiste is making more of an impact than he did earlier in the year and starting to do some things when he's out there too. So it's just one of those things that now that you're 6 weeks into the season, you start to see more and more guys getting their feet under them and starting to play better football. One of those guys to me, if we're going to stick on defense here on the rewatch, was Lathan Ransom. I thought he played a pretty great game from start to finish. Obviously, he has the interception on the first series of the game for Michigan State, but the play he made on Trey Mosley down the sideline when the play ended up being reviewed and ruled an incompletion, which was the correct call, obviously. Like that sort of ability to play through the ball is something that the cornerbacks are not doing, and the safeties for Ohio State are doing a very good job of that. And so, whatever the difference is, I don't know if that's just instinct. I don't know if it's something that they're being taught. I guess we'll try to find that out this week. But because it does seem to be an issue with the corners not playing, as you mentioned out in snap judgments on Saturday, not playing through the football. And the safeties are doing that. And Lathan Ransom was a prime example of that. And clearly, whatever he's doing in practice is working out because he seemed to supplant Josh Proctor on Saturday for the majority of the starting snaps. And I thought was interesting what Ohio State's doing at safety is like Ronnie Hickman. Even when they brought in the second wave and they had Cam Martinez out there, they'd keep Ronnie Hickman out there. And then when they had Sonny Styles and Kai Stokes out there, they'd keep Josh Proctor out there just to kind of make sure they had somebody that was, more of the guy that was the real, safety in the back end to keep things in front of them, which unfortunately, then we're going to skip around in the game here a little bit, I guess. But Michigan State's final touchdown of the game, you saw Josh Proctor not get over in time and knock a ball out where he probably could have if you rewatch the Michigan State touchdown in the fourth quarter. Like the Buckeyes are in a cover 2 there, and you can see that Jair Brown kind of lets him get behind him, and Proctor seemed to be wanting to play up into the line of scrimmage, and the guy, great shot by the quarterback and put it right where it had to be. But that's a play that we saw Tanner McAllister get to and break up at Wisconsin. That's a play we saw Lathan Ransom make in this game against Michigan State. And so you see just that little difference between what Josh Proctor may be doing or may not. I don't know. With Josh, you never know because he's always looking for like a highlight play, and sometimes those little plays just escape him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they use Josh and Lathan moving forward because I've said this before that I've always thought Josh is better suited playing down closer to the line of scrimmage, but Ronnie Hickman's also really good at that too. So he's kind of like blocked in that regard by Ronnie, and he's kind of blocked in the more center fielder regard or coverage regard by Lathan Ransom. So it's not that I think Josh is a really good player. They just have a lot of really good players at safety right now. But I do think some of that can be matchup dependent. Like if they're playing, for instance, Iowa, and after the bye week, a team that's going to play big and run the ball a lot, maybe you put Josh in the game there more than Lathan. But Lathan,
yeah, especially because Josh just played probably his best game in 3 years against Wisconsin. So
right.
Like there is this weird catch-22 where you just like, okay, who's the right fit? And it speaks to what Perry Eliano and Jim Knowles are doing just to recognize that, I guess, and say this is going to be it's almost like what Tony Alford seems like he wants to do at running back. Like this is a Trey game. This is a Mayan game. I mean, you don't want them to be picked because they're hurt or not, but they certainly seem to have some flexibility.
Which is good. Yeah, I think you'd rather have that than not, certainly. I thought Lathan saved 2 touchdowns in this game. Both those plays you mentioned. And I didn't have an appreciation for the interception watching it live up in the press box. I just thought it was kind of an arm punt that he ran underneath. And I guess it was that to some extent. But Jaden Reed kind of beat Denzel Burke on the post and was behind Ronnie Hickman. And there was an opportunity for Peyton Thorne to lead Jaden Reed into the end zone and have him win the race to what would have been a touchdown. And Lathan kind of undercut him, which I did see rewatching it. I didn't really pick up on watching it live, but that saved the touchdown. And then the ball on the sideline to Mosley. That was almost a coverage bust. Michigan State was playing with tempo. They didn't really seem to be lined up right, Ohio State, and he got open down the sideline, and Lathan just had really good awareness, and as you mentioned, played physically through the ball. So I think that's what he gives them, a lift coverage-wise, a lift in the middle of the field as a guy who can cover a lot of ground. But I think that Josh Proctor still has a major role to play on this defense. Maybe this just wasn't the kind of game for him to do that.
Yeah, and I think I actually have a small concern defensively coming out of this game. As you watch Michigan State, the very few times they were able to get anything really going in the offensive flow, they did go to a little bit more of a tempo offense and those little quick hitters that were 6, 7, 8 yards a pop. And that is something that Ohio State, I think, has to deal with eventually. How do you make sure everyone's set when you have so much pre-snap stuff happening? If you can get them to the line and get quickly after them, you're going to be able, I think, to control them and keep them from doing a lot of the exquisite and exotic stuff that they do. So it seems to me like an area where I would be somewhat like looking ahead, I guess, probably to Maryland or Penn State. To see how that translates into that game, because that was a bit of a concern to me rewatching this. Now, again, a lot of these things are nitpicking, but when Ohio State's scoring 9 out of every 10 times they touch the football, like, who cares, I guess. But that was just something where I was rewatching it going, man, every time they went to tempo, they got a little rhythm going, and there wasn't much Ohio State could do to disrupt it. They needed Michigan State to make a mistake to stop it. So that was something that I guess kind of popped up over my head watching that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it, but I think that's right. You know, the reason you do that, and Urban Meyer talked about that when he was at Ohio State, you like the tempo because it keeps the defense clean. There's just not time to set up whatever you want to set up. You just got to play whatever your base is. So I think that in that situation, when that happens, that's when you really need your defensive line to get after it and kind of blow up whatever's happening there. And I think the defensive line has played really well to this point, but I'm not sure we've seen them be overwhelming in those situations where it's like kind of just on them in terms of a pass rush. So
yeah, and that's the difference between not having a Chase Young, and having a Chase Young, right? I mean, you have a guy that is just different like that, that can make those plays one-on-one. But because the game of football is changing so much, I mean, these teams are taking a one-step drop and throwing. It's not like they're allowing you to pass rush. So that's where, what Zach Harrison talked about after the Rutgers game really was just hands up, matching hands, making sure that they're finding other ways to disrupt the quarterback. And they did not do that very well against Peyton Thorne and Michigan State. Again, in the very limited times that they had any sort of offensive momentum, they did not have 150 yards against the Ohio State starting defense. So that is, in itself, obviously a very small nitpick. But as you watch Maryland, Penn State, Michigan coming up in the next 6 weeks, things get a little bit different in that situation because those teams have guys that can break touchdowns.
Yeah, it puts an onus on being really good on first down, I think. I think that play that Lathan made down the sideline, Michigan State ran for 6 yards on first down. I think it was 2nd and 4, and then they got in the tempo and almost hit that big play. So, but if they would have ran on first down and it was for no gain, or it ended up being 2nd and 8, I'm not sure that Michigan State's doing that. So it's the offense has to get going too to have that happen. And Ohio State's defense by and large has been really good on basically every down. So like I'm not super worried about it, but it is something to keep in mind. And I think probably the recipe to kind of negate some of the stuff that Jim Knowles wants to do. But he's also, I mean, we're not football coaches, and we've come to that conclusion. I'm sure teams that have played against him have tried to do it, and his defenses have been really good the last couple of years. So I'm sure he has answers for that as well.
I think so. Let's talk about TreVeyon Henderson, because I just want to ask people, what do you want out of the guy, right? What do you want? And I know that fans, especially on game day, are notoriously myopic, and you don't really see the forest through the trees. A lot of people have had a few too many adult sodas and are probably just speaking a little bit out of turn. But the number of things I saw on Saturday, just perusing social media at halftime, at the end of the game, throughout the evening, TreVeyon's not the guy. He's not he doesn't have it. Like 19 carries, 120 yards. Like, what do you want out of a guy? Like 6 yards a carry is pretty good. And I just don't know. And he obviously clearly still not 100%. I thought he played pretty good. I think he had 5 runs of over 10 yards. I don't know what is the standard if that's not good.
Yeah, I thought he played pretty well. Also, I'm sure maybe one of the plays that might be front of mind for people that might be criticizing him, or that 3rd and 1 play where it looked like a hole was there and he kind of missed it and just dove forward and didn't get the conversion. I get that stuff. Like everyone who watches Trey, I think, can maybe rightfully say that sometimes his vision is not spot on, but I don't know. That's probably true of a lot of young running backs. He is still a sophomore. Maybe we forget that sometimes too, but I thought he played well. And the thing that's like an equalizer for him that we've not seen much of, or the thing that I think would calm people down a little bit, is if he's able to hit the home run. And I just don't think he's healthy enough to do that. The one long run he had against Michigan State, there was a lane there, I think, for him to like really explode through that. But whatever is going on with his foot, I just think is keeping him from getting to that gear that he needs to get to turn that, what I think it was like a 26-yard run into a 70-yard run and be a touchdown. So, I mean, he's injured. He's playing through it. I give him credit for playing through it. But I thought the last two times we've seen him, which is this game and the second half of the Wisconsin game, I think he's run well. So I don't know what else we can ask of him either, other than get healthier and get back to being his normal self.
And there's also a portion of the offense where he would be able to make some of those plays that he hasn't been used in. That's in the passing game. They've not used him as a receiver out of the backfield, which is an area he excelled in as a true freshman, and an area that opens up some of those big lanes. I mean, obviously you can go back to he had the Minnesota game, a year ago, the 70-yard touchdown on the little middle screen. That sort of burst, I mean, it's clear he's not healthy because he does not have that burst. You can tell he's sort of laboring on his leg a little bit, but I just feel like he's getting a little bit too much, poking at him for a kid that's fighting through clearly an injury that is not making it comfortable for him. And, Ohio State obviously needed him pretty bad on Saturday as they were down Mayan Williams. So I think we should be giving a kudos there and not a, there. But I did think it was interesting that 3rd and 1 play that he didn't get opened the door to a moment that I think is probably going to be looked over in the big picture of this season. But it really speaks to what Ryan Day and Justin Fry talked about the entire offseason, which is when you got to get a yard, can you get a yard? They missed the 3rd and 1 on the last play of the first quarter and say, hey, we're going to go for it at their own 46-yard line, up 14-7. I don't think it matters in the big picture if they get that or not, because they were not going to lose the game unless, something crazy happened. But the fact that Ryan Day decided, screw it, we're going for it here, and put it on the offensive line to blow people out on the next play, and Trey got 7 yards off tackle. That to me is one of those like moments. That's a test moment. That's a how tough are you guys? How much do you want this? And to me, that is one of those plays that I think, like, if I was to put an asterisk on the entire season, depending on how this shakes out from here, that I would say that's a moment where they were different. You go back to the Rutgers game and how many times they tried to score inside of the 5-yard line and couldn't. Obviously, they said, hey, we're going to lean on the offensive line, and we're going to run it straight down your throat. And I thought that play was a big play, and not just a big play in this game, because again, that probably wouldn't matter, but like for just a tenor of the season, I think it was very important.
Yeah, I think that was them challenging the offense a little bit, and I like that too for a different reason. Well, I liked it for the reasons you just said, but another reason, because Ryan Day kind of touched on this last week when Austin asked him about CJ grading out as a champion in the Rutgers game. Maybe people thought he didn't play that well, and one of the things that Ryan said was, well, it's not just the throws he makes and he doesn't make, it's the decisions that he makes throughout the course of the game. And on that play, it looked like that Michigan State was geared up for an inside run, and CJ changed it to an outside run. And they got like a nice kick out from Mitch Rossi. They got a good seal from Parrish Johnson, and Trevion Henderson, I think, picked up 7 yards on 4th and 1. Like, it was relatively easy, but I don't think it would have been so easy had CJ not changed that play. So that's the kind of stuff that maybe gets unnoticed sometimes about what he has to do. And it's simple enough, like, oh, they're loading up the middle, run outside. Like, I get that. He's not, doing, it's not rocket science, but I think that stuff does matter. So I would give a little bit of credit to CJ on that play as well. But I agree. It was a test moment, I think. A little bit of a risky proposition, I guess, with the state of the game at that particular moment. But I think that is something that Ohio State can kind of hang its hat on moving forward, knowing that it was successful in that situation.
Yeah, it just felt like a moment where if there was any shot for Michigan State in that game, it ended on that play and then the 51-yard touchdown pass to Julian Fleming on the very next play. Because that's one of those moments where, like, Michigan State did not belong in the game. Ohio State gave them their touchdown, but still it kind of felt like there was an opportunity for some sort of momentum to be built, and then they just stepped on their throat and ended it. And that was that 2-play sequence, I think, was one of those that if they can do what people want them to do this year and win a national championship, that you look back at and go, that's a moment they realize, hey, we're going to be different than we were a year ago. So I like that. I liked it. I also, I mean, we'll stick at running back. I really love Dallin Hayden's effort. Again, he is a surprise for me, just the way that he's seeing things and running the ball.
Decisive, and that's what Kevin Wilson said after the Toledo game that he played quite a bit. Just like maybe he doesn't always pick the right lane, but he picks it quickly and he goes there, which I think you have to appreciate about a young running back, and the other stuff can be coached up throughout his career. But I like him, and I thought Xavier Johnson ran really well for them too, and a couple of times that he had to. Like, that kid's a really good football player. It's kind of astonishing all the things he can do.
Do you buy Austin's theory that was plays that were put in for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they just decided to say, let's use him for Xavier? Or did you think it was more Xavier has actually been a running back at one point in his Ohio State career, so let's just put him back there and do things with him?
I think those are more running back plays. So I'm not so sure they want to be handing the ball off to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think they like to use him out of the backfield to get particular matchups in the passing game or get some motion stuff going, which they did. I think there were things that happened in this game for sure that are things they want to do with Jackson, with all the different motions they were using in the backfield to attack an undisciplined Michigan State pass defense. But the handoffs to Xavier, I do not think are things they want to use for Jackson, because I wouldn't want to hand the ball off to Jackson. It seems like a risky proposition as well.
Yeah, seems like a waste. Like, you have to practice taking handoffs. It's not something that's natural.
They're handing it off to Emeka, though. He looks pretty good. Well,
he seems to know what he's doing back there. I think that, I joked about this on Saturday night after the game when we were back in my house. Like, at some point, people are going to start thinking Emeka Egbuka isn't getting enough credit for how good he's playing. But he's been, he leads the team in touches or catches and yards. But because Marvin makes just 3 ridiculous touchdowns a game, you go, wow. Does Emeka get enough credit for what he's doing? And I just, I know you wrote about it on Sunday, but it is going to be crazy what this offense can do when everyone's back. Like, it's silly season watching what they're doing. They don't care. It doesn't matter if they're starting at the 1 or the 30, or the 50. They just like, we're going to score in 4 plays and you're not going to stop it. Like, it's bananas to me.
I'm curious what you think of this, because I was trying to tally it up as I was rewatching the game. I counted like 9 or 10 things that I don't think I've seen them ever do before under Ryan Day, whether that's formationally or little tweaks within maybe different plays we have seen before. But just the creativity that I mentioned on snap judgments after the game was kind of really hit home for me in rewatching it. And I'm wondering, like, as you see that stuff, like the Fleming touchdown, for example, they get 2 tight ends in the backfield. They motion Travion out, they bring him back in, they fake the handoff to him, and then they throw the bomb to Julian. Like, they had never done that before. I think they did it twice in the game. That kind of stuff. Are they just intentionally breaking tendency to make people think about it? Or do you think like they're sitting in that office on Tuesdays and thinking like, we have all this stuff, let's have some fun with it, and this is going to be stuff we see moving forward?
Do you remember how good Urban Meyer's offenses were back in the mid 2000s?
I do.
Do you remember how stagnant Urban Meyer's offenses were in about 2016?
Sure do.
I just think it's saying we have to keep improvising. We have to keep adapting. We have to keep changing things. And what Ryan Day is doing and proving which to me is the ultimate mark of a good coach. He's adapting to what his players are and not forcing his players to adapt to what he wants to do. And to me, that is the absolute mark of a coach that will be successful for a long time. He wants to take advantage of what his guys do best. And some of your best straight up football players are Mitch Rossi and Cade Stover, and you have to keep them on the field. So however you can do that, and to do that where you can still keep Julian Fleming or Marvin Harrison or Emeka Egbuka, like, there's so many moving parts that why would you not just have fun? And you brought up after the game on Saturday the reaction that he had when he saw Kevin Wilson in the tunnel. Like, that was a rare moment. That was a unique expression of appreciation for each other. Like, I think they really just enjoy kind of going out there. It's almost like, Sandlot football, where you're just like, okay, we're going to do this with this guy. We're going to run him over here. And it's like this Kyle Shanahan, like, world of like, let's just do whatever we want and see how it plays out. Because the beauty of that and the freedom that this offense gives Ryan Day, and to a lesser extent, CJ Stroud, is that if you do make a mistake, it doesn't really matter. Like you're just going to get it back. And, you can do that even more confidently now because of what this defense is capable of doing. And at least the fact that they're going to get off the field, more often than not.
That's a good point that I hadn't considered. Maybe they are feeling a little more freedom to do stuff like that. Whatever it is, I hope it sticks because I get that the stats are great and like everyone loves the final scores, but I hope too people can take time to appreciate just like kind of how fun the offense is, because I think this is the most fun that it has looked and enjoyable it's been to watch in quite some time. It's always been pretty good, and this one is following that trend and might even end up being better than some of the best offenses we've seen. But I just think the look of it and the way they're drawing stuff up is really cool. So it's made the rewatches more enjoyable. So thanks to Ryan for that.
Without question, they're just very fun to watch them operate. And I mean, I am not an X's and O's football nerd like I'd like to be. I hope to get better at understanding some of that nuance that goes into the game. But if you just watch it and see, like, man, they're doing things that people just can't really do. And it's not that other teams around the country don't try to do stuff like that or try to get exotic with their formations or pre-snap movement or any of that stuff. It's that you have 30 players that can execute it at a stupid high level. And that's where it goes from being like, okay, you can watch Mike Leach and Mississippi State, or even Shane Beamer and South Carolina. They're doing a lot of that, stuff that's kind of fun to watch. But when you see throws like the third down throw that Marvin Harrison was given down the sideline from CJ Stroud off his back foot, falling away 35 yards down the field into an absolute basket over his shoulder on the sideline. Like, that's not normal. And I think one of the unfortunate parts of this is that it sets an expectation that that's how it should always be. And that's how it's always going to be. And it's just not how it's always going to be. So you should try to enjoy it. And I think that Ohio State fans sometimes are so spoiled that we take it for granted that this is just what happens when in Columbus, but it's really different right now.
It is very different right now. I'm glad that you mentioned that CJ threw that off his back foot, because last week I highlighted some of the throws that he missed. And on those throws that he missed, my explanation for them was, well, he couldn't step into the throws, and he was coming up short or behind a couple of times when he just couldn't get his feet fully under him or fully step into it. That happened a few times against Michigan State. The first touchdown to Marvin Harrison, the third down throw you mentioned, the crazy catch that Marvin made in the end zone, like all those plays, CJ kind of threw that off his back foot, but just put a little more oomph on it, I think, with his arm, or had better placement with it. So like to me, that was him learning from last week. When it wasn't perfect, he was off a little bit, and this week when it wasn't perfect, he found a way to still remain on point with his throws and be the accurate quarterback that he almost is almost all the time. So I thought that was a good step in the right direction for CJ on a day when he was pretty surgical.
It's just one of those things. One of the things that just impresses me about him, we actually had a snap judgments at the Woody Hayes a few weeks ago when we had CJ on Tuesday afternoon, and he was breaking down a couple plays. He was breaking down the Julian Fleming touchdown catch against Toledo. And you realize just how smart he is about what's going on the field. And on Saturday night, as he did his post-game interview, like, he was breaking down stuff on the fly. I'm like, man, it's so impressive, because you just don't really get to know a lot of the inside of the game from that perspective. And I appreciate that CJ has been able to help us kind of get a little bit more of that, and his ability and willingness to break it down the way he has been really cool. Let's do some quick hitters here. Marvin Harrison. Here's the thing. I want to talk about this. It was first quarter. Ohio State had 3rd and 1 inside of their own 10-yard line. It's 14-7. So this is the touchdown drive, the one to Fleming. Michigan State is playing off him like 10 yards on a 3rd and 1. And I'm like, you're just surrendering it. And that sort of respect is what I'm saying. Like, I don't think people understand how much different the talent level is at Ohio State than 98% of the teams they're going to play, because it's 3rd and 1. It's 14-7. Michigan State has a chance to get a stop and maybe get the ball at midfield or good field position. and they're playing Marvin Harrison 10 yards off the ball, and all CJ has to do is dump a little slant for 5 yards for a first down. And it's like, you just surrender it. And they're forcing teams to give up that early in the game. It's kind of crazy.
They get 12 yards easier than I've ever seen anybody get 12 yards. And I guess like the receivers' releases are so good, and Marvin in particular, that I guess you have to respect it. But if I were calling the plays, I certainly would be giving a guy a 10-yard cushion on 3rd and 1.
There are a lot of things we could talk about in this game, but I think it's important to move ahead. Unless there's anything specifically that you have else in this game that you're like is a concern or a point that you want to make about the first half and the starters being out there, that sort of stuff.
No concerns other than stuff we've talked about already. I'll just do the weekly mention of Tommy Eichenberg is really good.
He's so freaking good. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable to see the steps that guy's made in 1 year. I mean, I know I say it every week. I sound like a broken record, but he's making tackles even on plays where he doesn't make tackles. Like, he's just in the right spot and forcing an offensive lineman to not be able to push him out of the way, and the running back runs into him and falls down. Like, it's just that kind of stuff that he's doing at such a high level, and you can see the way he's impacting the other players on the team. I multiple times in this game on Saturday, I actually looked out there and like, man, you should probably get him off the field right now. Like, you don't need him out there, and then you take him off the field and Michigan State goes straight down the field and scores a touchdown. You're like, okay, maybe you should just keep him on the field. Back in the old days, of football, like 10 years ago, there were a number of times Ohio State would be in a game where they'd be up like 63-0, hypothetically. And the backups would be on the field and the opponent would move the ball down the field. They'd get to like the 35, and Jim Tressel would bring in the starters and bring them back in. And they because and I don't know if I want that to happen, but I feel like the backup defense in these last couple of weeks has been pretty bad. And I think that's a concern. And I think that the primary spot where it's been bad is linebacker, because they're not able to stand things up the way that Tommy and Steele are. We watched the 75-yard touchdown run by Braylon Allen for Wisconsin. It's just nobody touched him. You watched this drive for Michigan State in the fourth quarter. Looked pretty easy. Like, what's the difference? Is it the defensive line not getting any pressure? Is it the linebackers? And that was Chip Trainum and I think Reed Carrico out there, and a little bit of Cody Simon. Is it not having Ronnie Hickman out there? Like, who's the guy that really changes things in that moment? Is it Tommy or Ronnie, or is it just both those guys have to be on the field all the times, or otherwise the other team's going to score?
I think it's both of them. I'm not sure that anyone diagnoses plays quicker than those two. That's the thing that sticks out most to me with Tommy. It's like he knows what's happening before the ball snaps, like every single time. I don't know if that's film study or what, but he is a freak with knowing exactly where the ball's going to go. And also, too, last year I felt like the linebackers in general, with Tommy in particular, would just sort of like run in the blocks. And then I feel like maybe Jim Knowles got here in January and said like, hey, Tommy, you can run around those, right? And he's like, oh, really? And now he's just not getting touched.
Yeah. You don't have to let him touch you. That's not right, the rule.
Yeah. So he's awesome. Every week he's awesome.
Let's get to your favorite part of the show, the game rewatch show. The part where we go, is Ryan Day doing enough to let Kyle McCord develop? And I know that's the bill. We'll call it the Landis laugh, or the Landis lament. Let's call it the Landis lament, because that's what it is. But when you bring a guy into the game with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, ostensibly the idea is it's early enough that you can let him go in there and run the offense, right? Mm-hmm. First drive that Kyle McCord is in the game, they run the ball in the first 2 plays. Third play, he makes a somewhat dangerous throw to Jaden Ballard, who makes a good catch and probably should have been a first down. I think Forward Progress, if you rewatch the game, like, it was a first down. I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I guess because everyone just wanted to go home, but like, and then that's it. And you give him one more throw the rest of the game. And the next throw that he made is that little rollout. He throws a dart to Reese Stockdale. That's kind of shows you what Kyle McCord's arm can do when he's in the rhythm. But if you're just going to bring him in the game to have him handed off to, TC Caffey, aren't you just better off putting in Devin Brown to do that? Or
just running Wildcat, maybe, if you wanted to put TC Caffey directly behind center. I don't. I know there's a balance there, and I suppose I get where Ryan Day's coming from by saying he doesn't want to show up teams. Again, I don't think that should matter when you're in conference games, but especially in a situation like we saw on Saturday, if you're able to get him into the game in the third quarter, I think you should at least treat that first drive like it's the first quarter and let him do a little more than
because they kept
seen.
the starting offensive line out there. So
Right.
the idea was, I think, to run the offense. And then, like I said, he gets what should have been a first down, but then you just reel it all in. And it's not apples to apples, Bill, because 2020, the COVID year, everything was whack. When CJ Stroud got into the game, he didn't get to throw the ball. We know that. When Jack Miller got in the game, like, Ryan Day spent a fair amount of time preseason a year ago, and even in the first month of the season, talking about the fact that, well, CJ's never thrown a college pass. Like, you got to take it easy. You got to, like, you are doing things offensively right now that allows you to give Kyle some meaningful snaps and some experience. But if he's not out there reading defenses and making throws against live bullets, like, is it wasting that opportunity?
Yeah, I think it is, or at least I'll say this: like, I don't want to be sitting in the team room in September of 2023 hearing about how Kyle McCord doesn't have enough game reps. They've had ample opportunity. So if they've gone into the season feeling like Kyle has not had enough game reps, that's their fault because they've had plenty of chances. And I know he's got the start under his belt. That's something different from what we're talking about. There seems like there is more wiggle room here than they're allowing Kyle. And I think you can also see that Kyle's pretty frustrated by it. And I wonder maybe what that does to his psyche as he's ostensibly in a competition to try to succeed CJ Stroud, even though they're not letting either backup quarterback do very much. I'm sure he wants to be able to show what he can do in a game setting. So I don't know. Maybe Ryan Day will tell you that practice is more important than whenever he gets in garbage time. But I think they should let him throw it around a little more.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, he may be getting better reps against better opposition in practice, but it may be worth it, in my opinion. And my opinion means absolutely zero. Let's be clear. Like, let's say the Iowa game. Doesn't it make more sense to bring in Kyle on the fourth series of the game in the first quarter or second quarter and say, hey, go out there and run the real offense, and do that with Ibuka and Harrison and those guys out there? Because even though he was out there with the first team offensive line, he was still out there with the second tier offense wide receivers. So did, had Dallin Hayden in there, not Travion Henderson. So they're still like not all the same moving parts, but I don't know. I just wonder if you're inadvertently like turning down the confidence of your backup quarterback in a way that I don't think it's being done on purpose, but I think you can see that Kyle may not have like the same confidence he should going out there.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to put it. Like, it's not, I don't think they're like stunting his growth because honestly, while I feel like it's valuable if he would throw, like, I don't think it's tremendously valuable because he's out there probably against backups who don't know what they're doing either. And they're not high leverage situations and the stadium's empty. Like, it's practice honestly is probably more high leverage than a lot of those moments. But I do wonder if like in the back of his mind, he thinks like, oh, well, they don't trust me to do this. Like, then how does that impact his psyche moving forward? And like, we're psychoanalyzing, I guess, Kyle McCord, and maybe he doesn't care about any of this, but trying to put myself in his shoes, maybe I'd feel that way sometimes too. So I don't know. Like Ryan Day was pretty blunt. Like we don't want to run up the score on people, so that's why we don't do it. But I'm not so sure it's the right way to handle it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think you should just run up the score on people. That's just me. I understand, wanting to have professional courtesy, but if the shoes were on the other feet in this game and Michigan State had somehow come out of the gate swinging and clobbered Ohio State and was up 49-20, do you think they would have stopped?
I don't. And actually, I just grabbed the scorebook to look this up. So they took Peyton Thorne out at some point in this game. They put in Noah Kim.
I think he got hurt.
Did Peyton Thorne get hurt?
I think he did. I think on Michael Hall's final sack, he kind of got up pretty slow, and I don't know if it was just a cautionary thing or if I'm just pulling that out of thin air. But he didn't look comfortable getting up, and then the next drive he wasn't in.
Well, regardless, the game was over, and their backup quarterback was in, and he threw 10 passes. So why can't Kyle?
Yeah, there it is. That's it. Anything else?
No.
What do we make of the freshmen that traveled? Anything?
If I had to guess like which freshman receivers would have traveled, maybe I would have guessed Caleb Brown, but I don't know that he did. I don't think
Caleb Brown did. Caleb Brown
he
did not play except for on punt return or punt block situations. And Kojo Antwi traveled, and Kojo did have a couple snaps of offense. But I think the surprise is that Keon Graves, who's the guy that a lot of people are expecting to sort of elevate in that room, was not on the travel roster. Mm-hmm. Carson Hinsman traveled with Ohio State, but guys like Trey LaRue did not. So you start to look at some of these other positions on the offensive line. Tegra Shabola was there.
Tegra traveled,
but he didn't play, which is somewhat unusual. Other than that, I don't think there were any real surprises. CJ Hicks traveled, Sonny Styles traveled, Kai Stokes traveled.
Caden Curry was there. Yeah.
Caden Curry played. Yeah. Dallin Hayden, obviously.
Kenyatta Jackson was there too. Like Amari
Kenyatta Jackson and Hero Canoe both traveled.
Hero Canoe did, Amari
and so did Bennett Christian.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, if you want to talk about the evolution of the Ohio State offense, that's Cade Stover, G. Scott, Mitch Rossi, Bennett Christian, and Sam Hart. They traveled 5 tight ends.
Patrick Gerd was there too.
And Patrick Gerd. So 6 tight ends traveled. I don't think Gerd would have been there. Joe Royer still not with the team after losing his mother 2 weeks ago. So we don't know how long it'll be till he's back. Condolences to the Royer family, to everything they're going through. That's going to be a, who knows situation. But when you talk, it's just sort of weird. You travel 74 dudes and 6 of them are tight ends. It speaks to how important Ryan Day wants that position to be, I guess.
Yeah, this is. I've always said the Ohio State offense full of 5-star receivers and CJ Stroud is driven by the tight ends. So
yeah, the safety-driven defense, tight end-driven offense. We've figured it out. Kevin Wilson, you hear that? Bill Landis is talking about the tight ends, so you can lay off. Kevin.
Don't have to trash me on Twitter again like you did a couple weeks ago. Just flamethrowed me.
Yeah, he's just torpedoing your confidence like they're doing the Kyle McCord. It's a Philly thing. They hate you, Philly guys.
Must be.
I'm just kidding, everyone. Nobody hates anyone from Philly. Go Birds.
That's not true. People do hate people from Philadelphia.
I think most of the people that hate people from Philadelphia are from Philadelphia. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the city of brotherly love. Mm-hmm. It's earned the moniker. Bill, anything else for you before this gets weird?
No. Looking forward to watching some games that aren't Ohio State games this weekend. Maybe we can do a rewatch of like Penn State, Michigan next week and get some thoughts.
That's true. Next Sunday. So America, here's what I'm going to ask of you in the comment section for this video for next Sunday or next Monday mornings, the podcast daily, the rewatch show as it's formally named. Do you want us to break down a specific game, or should we just be talking about the weekend en general? That's in general in French. To discuss on this episode, which is always it's turning into one of my favorite shows we do every week. So other than that, you guys let us know how you want us to handle that. Bill and I will be on the road to Roosters on Monday, so we'll see you there if you want. We're going to be shooting there. What about noonish, right?
That's right.
At Roosters on Olentangy River Road. Come out and join us. Other than that, it's going to be a little bit less content probably this week at the podcast, but we do have live press conference from Ohio State on Tuesday. That'll be the lone media availability of the week for the Buckeyes. So, we'll be trying to figure out some ways to do other stuff this week. So, for Bill Landis, I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This has been the Podcast Daily for Monday, October 10th. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later on.